first YouTube video, and I'm going to be talking about like tips for how to navigate a bookstore. And I know that navigating a bookstore for people who love reading and people who buy books all the time is like a super easy thing, but to some people who might just be getting into reading and wanting to buy their first book, they might be needing some tips. There might be a little anxiety with going to a bookstore, and I did want to preface that libraries are a little different, and the sense that you don't buy books at libraries, you borrow them, and there's just a lot of differences. So when I talk about how to navigate bookstores, I'm not talking about libraries. Otherwise, hello, my name's Elizabeth, and I read and I write, and I love literature and composition, and I'm hoping that through this YouTube I'll be able to help other people love the same things, and also teach, show my future kids and my future students that they can achieve their dreams too, even if it's as little as just starting a YouTube and talking about what they love. So let's get right on. So tip number one is to research the bestsellers beforehand and kind of see if any are interesting to you. So I think the best way to do this, honestly, is just go to Google and search up bestsellers of 2024 or whatever year you want to, like, if there's specific, like say you want 1998 for some reason, you can go like bestsellers of 1998 on Google, and it'll bring up this whole gigantic list of books that sold, like, that were just bestsellers that year. And I think it's important to do that as somebody who's new to maybe just literature in general, but also first time going to a bookstore and wanting to buy a book. I think looking at the bestsellers list can really help you get kind of a common ground as to maybe what you might find interesting, and if a lot of people found the books on this list interesting, maybe you will too. You can also research bookstores near you and see if any of them interest you. So once you've got like a basis of like, hey, this is what I'm looking for, the second thing would be, okay, where can I find what I'm looking for? And you can research different bookstores. Like, obviously it's a little different with like Barnes and Noble and Books A Million, where you just kind of know that they have this wide variety of books available, so you kind of know you can go there and pick up what you're looking for. But in smaller bookstores, sometimes they have a website, and so you can look up their website and kind of look at their like aura or their vibe, and you can kind of see like, okay, I really like this store's aesthetic, and I'm gonna go try to find my book there because it looks very similar to what I'm looking for. And then if there's just a bookstore that you just think is really cool, go try it out, go see what you can find. The third tip I would say is just go in knowing kind of at least that ground level of what you do want. So whether or not you researched bestsellers and you found a bestseller that you really want to read, or you didn't research at all and you're just going in completely blind, at least kind of go in knowing, okay, either maybe you don't want to read anything long, like know that you don't want that. Like, go in knowing that. If you don't want poetry, go in knowing you don't want that. If you need an academic source, go in knowing that you need that. And maybe that's just like a dumb tip. You're like, yeah, I feel like everybody goes into the bookstore knowing what they want. No. Half the time I go into a bookstore, I don't know what I want. I go in there and I buy a book at random. But for people who have never been in a bookstore, it's very, very overstimulating, and it's just a lot. So if you go in knowing kind of what you want or don't want in a book, then that kind of can help you narrow down and make it not so overstimulating and looking at all of those books and just everything staring at you. My fourth tip is just be open to asking for help and asking for suggestions. So if you are trying to find this particular book and you can't find it in the bookstore, there's always a worker willing to help you. Just be willing to ask the person working maybe if they know where the book is, or if they have any suggestions about where you could get the book. And then as far as like being open to suggestions, sometimes the bookshop workers will be trained to give you a suggestion based on what you ask them for. So if they don't have the book that you're looking for, they might suggest another book that's very similar or has maybe the same trope, or it's just as short as the one you wanted, or whatever's like the important thing about that book to you. Sometimes they'll suggest another book to you based on that. And my biggest tip is to be open to those suggestions. Even if you don't think you're gonna like it or whatever the case is, just go and find the book and look at it, because sometimes their suggestions are actually really, really helpful, and it could also find you another book that you just really, really like and really, really love. And that's the whole point of reading, right? My fifth tip is to look at the bestseller racks first. So as soon as you walk into the bookshop, and this is a little easier with like Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all these like big bookstore chains, they always have a bestseller rack. In a bookshop, you can always ask if they have a bestseller rack. Usually they will, because everybody wants to look at the bestseller rack, and those books that are on the bestseller list deserve to have that spotlight. So a lot of bookstores do, they almost always have bestseller racks. And I recommend, like, whether you researched or whether you didn't research the bestseller list, then you could still see the bestsellers that are available at that shop on their rack, which I think is also super beneficial. And if you did research bestsellers and you found one you really wanted and you went to the bookstore to find it, most likely it's going to be on the bestseller rack. So it's pretty like a simple, clean cut trying to find that book, but also it's just a great place to start. Especially for being a first timer in a bookstore, it could be super overstimulating, super just anxious in there, not understanding really how that particular bookstore works. And so I definitely recommend looking at bestsellers first, so you can, I mean, obviously everybody loves those books, maybe you will too, or maybe it'll lead you somewhere else, and that'll be great, because either way, you're furthering your exploration into books. So my sixth tip is, if the bookstore has coffee, I know Barnes & Noble usually has Starbucks in there or something. If a bookstore has like coffee or little drinks, whatever, and if you like coffee and stuff like that, I recommend getting it, because I feel like something big for a lot of people, a lot of first timers going to a bookstore, is that they worry that they're not going to look like a book person. And I've had friends tell me that before, so I know it's not just them. So if you're like nervous about going to a bookstore and you do, because you think you don't look like a book person and you want to kind of look more like a book person, I don't know what book people look like, but apparently there's a stereotype. I guess my recommendation would be, go get that coffee, go get whatever drink they offer, go get a donut or pastry that they offer, and eat it or drink while you look around. Usually bookstores, if they offer it, they don't care if you look around while you drink or eat. Maybe you need something kind of to fidget with as well. I think grabbing a coffee, grabbing a pastry, grabbing something can really help you with that fidgeting, but also just feel more included, I guess. I never buy coffee when I go to a bookstore, but I also have been in a bookstore so many times. So as a first timer, I think it might be helpful if you want to, if that's kind of your way of thinking, like you don't look like you're supposed to be there for some reason, I think, which you totally are. And then tip number 7, this just goes back to my original, like, before you go kind of stuff, but if you can't find a genre, or you can't find an author or a specific book, the workers are there to help you. They wouldn't be working there if they didn't like books in some way, shape, or form. So they should be able to help you. If you can't find a genre, like you're looking for science fiction and you just can't find that section in the bookstore, you can always ask a worker to help you find that section. Or if you're looking for a specific author, you can ask if they sell that author, etc., etc. Just remember that the worker is there to your benefit. You don't have to wander around confused, because that's not helpful. So just know that they're there. And then tip number 8 also goes back to another tip, but if they don't carry what you're looking for, just be open. So maybe you ask the worker, like, hey, I'm looking for this book, or I'm looking for this author, or I'm looking for this genre, but they don't carry it. be open to maybe those suggestions again on what they might have, that maybe it's not science fiction, but it does have some of the same themes as this science fiction book you were looking for. Or maybe you just wanted a book about horses, and they didn't have anything about horses, but they had books about farms and how other animals were raised, and maybe they have suggestions. And that just goes back to my suggestion tip, like, just be willing and open to take those suggestions, whether or not you use them. Just be open and think about them. Be like, hey, you know what, thank you, this was super helpful, and I'll think about it. Also, in addition to that, a worker might tell you, hey, I'm gonna refer you to this bookstore because I know in my system that they have that book. Be open to that. Be open to saying, okay, you know what, I'll go get it. Or, you know what, can you tell me, like, can you order it here and I can come pick it up? Be open to the suggestions like that too, because a lot of time workers will get a book for you and have it ordered or find it at another bookstore. Just be open to waiting a little bit on getting the book too, because the workers are there ultimately to help you. So just be open to the suggestions they might have, or, you know, other ways to get the book to you. Tip number 9 is, if you have time, go search, explore, wander around the bookstore on your own. So after you find your book, or after you find your author, genre, whatever, and you decide on a book that's just you really hope you're gonna love, and it's your first book, go take a gander yourself. Whether it's you found it already by yourself or through a worker, just walk around that bookstore, because more likely than not, you're going to come back to that bookstore, and the second time you come back, you're going to feel a lot better about that bookstore because you've been there before. And it's only helping you and furthering that feeling better if you wander around yourself, figure out yourself the way of that bookstore and how it works. And every bookstore is different, their layouts are different, they carry different things, like, they're all different. You can take in, like, okay, this is where this is where this is, and now I know I don't want to go to these sides of the bookstore, or these are the only sides I need to go to. Like, there's so many things you can learn about a bookstore just from wandering around yourself. Barnes and Noble and, like, Books A Million, they have, like, sides of the store where it's just, like, souvenir stuff, or, like, the word merchandise from different books, and so a lot of the time they'll carry some of that. Smaller bookstores, not necessarily, but sometimes they do, and so wandering around can help you discover some of that too. Tip number 10, and this is to me the most important tip, because I wish somebody had told me this the first time I went into a bookstore. It is not illegal to skim through a book. Most shops or bookstores have chairs, and they're completely open with you sitting down and reading a whole book without purchasing it. And not only that, if you don't have time to read the whole book in one sitting, usually if they have chairs sitting out and stuff, they do not care if you sit down with that book, and you can read it in store without purchase. And that means also that if you just want to stand, you grab a book and you're like, oh, this looks interesting, you can look in the book. And I think that causes some anxiety, because the book world is a little bit different than retail world, in the sense that when you go into Walmart, there's things that are in packages, and you're not supposed to open that package, or else, you know, you have to pay for it. You broke it, so you have to buy it, right? Like, there's different things like that. Bookstore, completely different. You go in there and they're already unpackaged, they're ready for you to look at, they want you to want that book. So it's completely unpackaged, it's completely ready for you to look at, skim through, read, whatever you want to do. And shops do not care if you sit there in one sitting and read that whole book without purchase and put it back. If they have chairs, it's an option. It's not illegal, you're not taking it out of the store and never returning it. So super simple tip, but something that I wish I had known the first time I went through. Tip number 11, I feel like this is maybe like a given, but maybe not, and so I wanted to put it on here. When you go into bookstores, prices are not negotiable. If when you go into Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, you can't negotiate a book price. So the way book prices are is that their publisher sets a certain amount. Usually, always on the back of the book, on the barcode, there is a, like, it's not a store barcode, it is a publisher barcode. And on top of that publisher barcode, there is a amount of money that you're supposed to sell that book for. And it's usually like US 19, Canada 21 or something. But it'll look like that. And usually, like Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, always like that. Unless they're running a sale. The only reason prices can be negotiable sometimes is if a bookstore is having like a year-end sale or a going out of business sale or whatever, and they just want to get rid of their books. Sometimes it'll be negotiable. But if you go into like those bigger chain bookstores, and almost every bookstore really, the price is not negotiable. And I want to just put that out there because I feel like, you know, maybe some people might walk into a bookstore and think, oh, it's like a book yard sale. That's not what it is. A bookstore is just as much a store as, you know, Walmart, and you wouldn't negotiate a price at Walmart. So just kind of keep that in mind going into bookstores. And then last tip, just to remain calm. Bookstores are supposed to be calming. People go to bookstores to calm down, to get rid of anxiety, to get lost in a book. They don't go to the bookstore to get anxious. And so I think knowing that, and knowing that everyone around you just is so calm, like this is a calm place, it's a safe place, and that can kind of help you regain the thought as, I'm okay, this is okay, everything's okay, I'm just here to buy a book, that's it. And it's also important to remember that nobody's looking at you. I feel like this is like something that people feel a lot, is like kind of going along with the I don't look like a book person. Maybe like, oh, I feel like people are looking at me, like I walked in and immediately people are just looking at me, they're looking at what I'm gonna buy, like they're making sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do because I don't look like I should be here. That's not true. If people are looking at you, they're just weird. It has nothing to do with the bookstore. People who love books are just the most kindest people because they've read all of these different crazy and horrible tragedies in books and things that can happen to people. And so they're a little bit more empathetic, they're a little bit more kind. There's nobody there like vetting against you, or nobody's gonna be mad at you if you don't find a book there and leave empty-handed. Nobody's gonna like, that's not it. So I hope all of those tips were super duper helpful, and maybe somebody can use that to their advantage to find a book they really love. It only takes one book to spark your love for reading and or writing, and so I hope that this encourages you to find that book. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon. Bye.